Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest in the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today we have a very special episode. We have Samer Soul on the line, and he's the managing partner over at Constellation Partners and also founder of Soul & Co. And this is part of our Middle East and Africa Summit series where we highlight the best of those that attended the Middle East and Africa Summit over in Abu Dhabi that the Milken Conference puts on. Samer, welcome to the show.
Real pleasure to be here, Alex. Thank you for having me. I'm a big fan and it's a privilege.
All right, so we got a lot to talk about here today. So I definitely want to get into the work that you're doing over at Constellation Partners and also talk about really the opportunity corridors between the US and Gulf region. But before we do that, we have to get into the how we start every episode with is what we call our Mission Matters Minute. So Samer, as you're aware, at Mission Matters, our aim and our goal is to amplify stories for entrepreneurs, for executives, and for experts. That's what we do. Samer, what mission matters to you?
Thanks. Well, I describe my mission as helping asset builders and asset owners, whether they're family principals or institutional leaders, move from capital in motion to capital with intention. And the way I do that is I partner with these stakeholders to help their organizations make better decisions that help them win in their markets. And more specifically, the way I do that is I integrate capital allocation, strategic discipline, corporate investment governance, and cultural intelligence, and align them because this is kind of my native areas in a way that helps them connect dots that and see patterns and recognize patterns that otherwise they wouldn't be able to see. And furthermore, help them figure out, are they, in order to face successfully against an opportunity or a challenge, are they in exploration mode or are they in, let's say, scaling and execution mode? So this is what I do. This is my mission.
Amazing. I love bringing mission-based people on here to share what they do, how they're doing it, really what we can all learn from that so we grow together. So it's great having you on finally.
Thank you.
The Middle East and Africa Summit. Now, I know it's been a little bit of time since the conference passed, but I'm curious, like, how was your experience? What brought you there? Have you been to a Milken event or one of these conferences in the past? Like, give me some of the backstory, Samer.
Great. So I'm based in the Gulf. So I've been in the Gulf for the last almost 15 years now. And the last Milken conference was the second time I've been invited. And it's great. And I really enjoy it. The quality of the conversations, the quality of the people is second to none, in my opinion. And I'd say, what I found, and we're talking now, this is kind of early December last year. And the conversations are always about kind of AI infrastructure, logistics, connectivity, and how the Gulf kind of sits at the center of a lot of, let's say, corridors for investment and capital and opportunities. And what I found was that the quality of the conversations at the Milken conference is way more mature than a lot of other events. And because what they do is the conversations focus less on, let's do a deal and let's fundraise versus let's have conversations about how we can find collaboration opportunities to kind of create strategic opportunities and strategic platforms where different stakeholders from around the world can really build something special together.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite conferences. And I know the one in Beverly Hills is coming up shortly. I'll be at that one, of course. But you mentioned you've been in the Gulf region for, going on 15 years. And just for a little time stamp for everybody in terms of when we're recording this on March 24th of 2026. And I know there's a lot going on in that area right now. I mean, do you care to comment on that at all?
Sure. Look, I mean, I think from the Milken conference, if we fast forward to today, the entire context has shifted. So, and that tells me that, look, the region is facing a crisis. Not the first time it faces a crisis. But what it tells me is that what remains true in the Gulf is that the ambitions of the countries and the structural advantages that you have in this region remain intact. But crises help you clarify what is important. And it clarifies what your strengths and vulnerabilities are. And I can go into that later on. But it also reveals who has, deep roots and understanding of how this region works versus those people who just come in and out riding favorable winds. So I think that moment of clarity is very important. And I can comment on that a little bit later.
Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of what you're seeing, specifically as it relates to the global investment corridors and really like what you're seeing in your experience the last 15 years in this evolution?
Sure. So I think let's take a step back. I think a lot of people still have this static image from 15 or even 10 or even 5 years ago of the Gulf as kind of a Gulf is where you go to fundraise and they write checks and you go and you deploy that capital outside the Gulf. So, US funds going in, sovereign or family wealth kind of flowing out. But that framing misses out on today's reality. Look, the Gulf sits at a global geographic and strategic center in the world. And this is being painfully obvious today with everything that's going on.
Oh, yeah.
And so there are multiple corridors that connect the Gulf to Asia, to the US, to Europe, Latam, Africa, et cetera. And I really see the Gulf kind of sitting in at the center of that constellation of capital, people, ideas, and operating platforms that connect through the Gulf. And the other thing that you talked about that evolution is those conversations that back then used to focus on commodity-based relationships, oil, energy, and just cash, petrodollars, have really evolved into platform-based ones where you have, let's say, if you want to do something really meaningful with Gulf wealth, it's really about coming to the region and saying, look, let us help you build a platform that does XYZ that is aligned with your national vision or your national interest, or partnering with your national champions. So, and there are many examples of that. Companies where I've sat on boards or investment committees or executive committees where that was the primary driver of those relationships. And so that is a very different picture from perhaps what a lot of people still think about and who aren't that familiar with the Gulf region.
Yeah. And so let's say that as people they shift their perspective, let's say that people start to accept that there's more going on and that this has evolved and changed to where you're not just going there to raise money and take those funds out, but you're actually building there. And I like your word platforms, like bringing a platform there in many different industries, many different niches, which I find just highly, since I've been covering the region now for going on a couple of years now, my perspective, and I think my long-term listeners, I hope their perspectives have changed as individuals and experts like yourself have come on and talked about the region and what they do. So I'm curious on, let's just say that for somebody that is maybe a little bit further along and they kind of get that part, but now they're thinking about identifying opportunities. What does that look like? What is that part of it? Identifying opportunities, what does that look like?
So I think in terms of think about identifying opportunities, and let's kind of take the current situation today, right? So when the dust settles and a lot of, let's say, stakeholders are going to kind of rethink about what the day after looks like.
Yeah.
I think the stakeholders are going to have to decide, okay, what are the national initiatives that we need to double down on? What are those initiatives that we need to pivot or slightly alter? Okay.
Yeah.
What are the initiatives that we absolutely need to stop and kill because they're not going to help us going forward? And what are the initiatives that we haven't thought about that we need to start thinking about doing that we've never done before? And so that moment of clarity that I talked about before is, I'd say, the context or the framework for how things should be thought about today and the day after. So, examples of, let's say, what would resonate in this part of the world would include anything that further improves the resilience of the countries in this region. So if you have a better way of, let's say, managing logistics, managing or ensuring food security, water security, defense, obviously, education, healthcare, these things are going to be top of mind for the governments and families that are actually thinking about generational change and not just kind of next year change. I mean, I think just to take a step back, I think what people have to remember, your audience has to remember, is the Gulf in one generation has had to go through a development phase from the moment those countries were kind of founded or refounded, became independent. That has taken 250 years for the United States since independence to go through its industrial evolution. The countries here are trying to do it in one generation. So
isn't that interesting? I find that fascinating, Samer, by the way. When you think about the time, compressing time like that, it's fascinating.
Yeah. right? And so, I mean, let me give you a couple of examples. So for a number of years, I sat on the executive committee for an infrastructure development platform called Vision Invest. And it is a shareholder in some of the kind of the national champions of Saudi Arabia in renewable energy and district cooling and then water treatment and other kind of core infrastructure that are really there to kind of build inside the region, but also in other parts of the world. And the great relationships that we were able to forge were with, technical partners and experts from different parts of the world, including China, Korea, the US, Europe, to really come up with adaptations for their technologies that were adapted to this part of the world, but in a way where you weren't just buying products, you were actually co-creating solutions that were suitable for this part of the world. Another example is, so I'm working with a group that is actually it's out of the US that is a pioneer in industrial heating. So this is where it's a solution for decarbonizing high heat intensive industrial applications for things like, metal and mining, who have this amazing solution. And the best part of the world to develop this is here in the Middle East because of solar energy. And so when you're bringing new novel ideas that maybe might not work for whatever reason, or might not scale as quickly as you'd like back in the US, come here and identify the right stakeholders, have those conversations, and think about how you are helping the stakeholders here achieve their multi-generational ambition. That's the mentality that will work here. And that's how these capital and opportunity corridors, this is the way they really work in the Gulf.
Man, it's amazing. And I just love what you said, like the whole, like trying to do in one generation what took the US 250 years. Like it's something else to me. I still marvel at that, and to see the progress and things. I still remember when NEOM, when they did kind of like a road show here, maybe a couple years back now. And then I go from there to like where it's at today, and it just blows my mind. It's amazing to me to see the things that are happening and so quickly. And I'm told from people that are from the region that I talk to that say, year over year, or those that maybe left and they're maybe in the United States or in other countries for a while, they go back and they're like, man, I don't even recognize certain things, and this is my town.
Sure.
I love it.
The speed of change is incredible. And I think I've spent, a third of my life growing up in Europe, a third of my life in the US, and now a third of my life here in the region. And I just love how every geography is different. All the people are different. But everyone has kind of similar aspirations to kind of make the next generation better off than the current generation. And I really admire that, especially about this part of the world.
Circling back to the opportunities there, I'm curious on your end, what kind of are there, or what kind of challenges do you think there are in uncovering maybe some of the opportunities there in the Gulf region? Or what kind of challenges are there?
Sure. So if you allow me, I'll be a bit more specific at kind of the opportunities.
Yep, go for it.
If let's say thinking about a high level checklist for what resonates in the Gulf and Gulf boardrooms and with sovereign wealth funds and governments and family businesses in this part of the world, right? So from my kind of, my seat sitting at some of these boards and executive committees, what gets approved versus what gets rejected are, look, is the opportunity that you're bringing, how well does it fit with the national vision of the country? Because when you go to a lot of, let's say, corporations or family businesses, their business models tend to be aligned with the national vision as well, because they are helping their country and their countrymen build their state, and their economies. So, and these are not slogans. This is actually real. So strategic fit with national visions is number one. Number two, I'd say, is localization potential. So it's not just about, hey, we'll sell you technology, we'll sell you a product. It's, can we make it here? Or can we place part of the value chain here in this part of the world? And so what a lot of boards want to see are jobs created and talent developed and supply chains built locally. And by the way, if you're in the US or Europe or Asia, and the reason why regional supply chains would be very important is because the Gulf has access to some of the fastest growing emerging markets around it. And being able to be strategically located here, as you build that kind of supply chain and logistics capability, is going to become a competitive advantage for anybody who's growing global. Number three, I mentioned before, is platform thinking. So we mentioned that before. Number four, and that goes without saying, it's about technology transfer and knowledge building. So going back to the national development, trying to do everything in one generation. You have a whole new generation of people, of really talented youth who want to grow, who want to succeed, who want to be entrepreneurs and business people and really kind of contribute to their families and their communities. And the development of expertise and bringing it here is also very important. And number 5, long-term commitment. Okay. So one thing to really stress is that Gulf culture is relationship first and transaction second. So the people from outside who kind of lose patience and don't show genuine commitment to this part of the world are not going to earn the right to access the opportunities in this part of the world. And which means that transactional players won't be able to, if they're not willing to plant a flag here, it's going to be very difficult for them to kind of really take advantage of what this region has to offer. And I've seen many examples of that, where people kind of chip in, they lose patience, they don't know how to read the room correctly, and then they go away. But the people who've really learned how to navigate with the right partners and the right Sherpas and so on and so forth, finally have that conversation, which then unlocks everything. And it's a huge difference. So yeah, so I'd say this is what resonates. Now, you talked about what are the challenges. I mean, look, when you go to any new part of the world, you got tons of challenges. I'll talk about, let's acknowledge geopolitical and security risk. Okay, that's challenge number 1.
Of course,
because it's in the news. Okay, So I don't want to, I want to acknowledge it for the audience, and I don't want to do a disservice to the audience. So it's really about the uncertainty today about physical security and energy infrastructure, and I won't pretend otherwise. But I think the principals and stakeholders that I work with, they're not fleeing. They're not sending their wealth abroad. They're focused on the day after and say, look, what do we need to make our business, our platforms, our economies even more resilient than what they are today? So how do we build better tomorrow? Because crises show you your weaknesses and vulnerabilities. And crises are a moment of clarity of how you build better. And I'd say, again, this is really where you have to come in with a strategic perspective and not a transactional perspective, and say, hey, this is how we can help your business, your enterprise, your supply chain, your economy be more resilient. So we want to acknowledge the geopolitical security risk, but for every risk, there is an opportunity. And this is what I'm trying to say. I'd say another challenge, obviously, is cultural navigation. I talked about how this part of the world works on a relationship first and transaction second. That Western business culture very often misunderstands or underestimates. So trust isn't built in conference rooms, having kind of these formal meetings and pitches. It's built afterward or before. It's at the dinner, at the lunch, at the, going to somebody's home. There's a concept and very unique to the Gulf called the majlis, the part of the home where the host invites friends, family, existing associates, potential associates to come and just chat and hang out and not talk shop. And just talk about everything else. Talk about family, talk about world events, talk about your favorite sports team, who's going to win the Super Bowl, who's going to win the World Series, etc. So it's the Gulf equivalent of the golf course or the country club. Okay, but it happens in people's home. And having that majlis mentality and investing in that over a period of time, this is where the real unlock happens. It's not in the conference room. What else? Some other challenges, I'd say information asymmetry. I think in kind of Eastern cultures or this part of the world, there's what is marketed and what is really meant, and being able to bridge the separation between what is being marketed and what is really needed. You need to have or fine tune your antenna or your receiving frequency to really understand the nuance between what is it that they're saying and what is it that they really mean. And it takes years and years of living it and breathing it and making lots of mistakes. And I have my own battle scars to show for really earning the right to say, yes, I understand what you're looking for. And let's talk about the real crux of the situation as opposed to talking around it. And I'd say execution risk, right? Laws and regulations and governance are moving very quickly. So you have to kind of stay up to speed. So having regional, I call them Sherpas or river guides in this part of the world who really kind of have integrated themselves in the region is very important, because they'll help you kind of map out and avoid the potential potholes that you need to avoid. And those are easy mistakes to avoid, but very expensive if you make those mistakes. So I'd say those are the kind of key challenges.
Man, Sammer, and for everybody listening, just so you know, we're bringing Sammer back onto the show. We got some other appearances coming later in the year, and I can't wait to dive deeper into some of the things that you mentioned. But for today, our time is up. But the last thing I want you to do here, Sammer, is if
Yes.
somebody wants to follow up, they want to
Sure.
connect, they want to continue to follow your journey. How do they do that?
Sure. Look, I'd say first of all is so I work best with, let's say, three kinds of partners or three kinds of
Hmm.
stakeholders, if you allow me. I'd say number one are boards and family principals that are seeking to improve their corporate or investment governance expertise, with a Gulf angle that really helps them align strategy, capital, purpose, and governance. Okay, that's number
Hmm.
one. Number two, there are asset owners and kind of institutional investors that are evaluating those corridor opportunities between the US and the Gulf. And
Hmm.
number three are those companies that are preparing for, let's say, market entry into the Gulf or expansion or even financing partnerships who really need someone who's been in the room where decisions get made here in the Gulf. Like, whether in the Gulf boardroom or in the Gulf Majlis room. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you are any one of these types of people, I'd be more than delighted to have a conversation with you.
Mm.
And if it resonates with your situation or somebody in your network, and you can definitely reach me on LinkedIn and on email. So we can have a great conversation and how I can be helpful to you.
Amazing. For everybody listening, just so you know, we'll definitely put that link in the show notes so that you can just click on the link, head right on over and connect with Sammer on LinkedIn. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. Yes, you heard me correct, daily. Each and every day, we're bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration, help you along the way in your journey as well. So hit that subscribe or follow button. And Sammer, man, I'm looking forward to our next conversation where we pick up the discussion and dive further into what you're doing over in the Gulf. But for now, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.